Good morning to everybody. I'm going to make a presentation that will sort of provide the background and a context for what will follow in a moment. First of all, thank you very much for taking time out to make this event. It's much appreciated. My name is Adote Bingpapo, and I'm one of the two founding co-chairs of Cooperation Africa. This organization arose out of a series of online discussion meetings amongst about 15 like-minded people, in that we all supported cooperatives. The discussions took place from September 2020, and the people involved were mainly, but not exclusively, from Ghana. And we initially met to explore the possibility of setting up a financial institution, a bank, to support cooperatives on the continent. We were very grand in our ambitions. But after about 18 months of meeting every month online, we reduced our ambitions somewhat. But what we decided to do is based on an assessment of the situation on the continent and focuses on what we consider to be the three main areas that require intervention to try to make lives for cooperatives a bit more enabling. So those three things are what? First, as you can see, you can't see, but behind the speakers, we have research and advocacy, which is that all people, cooperatives and the regulators, the state, need to know more about what is happening to cooperatives. Knowledge sharing, cooperatives need to know how to do better what they do. And cooperative financing is to provide access to finance to cooperatives. We were very pleased when Dr. Ibn Chambers agreed to become a co-patron of Cooperation Africa, and we will have a more formal introduction for him in a minute. We were also very pleased when we secured the agreement of Geraldine Fraser Muleketi to be the other co-chair. She is currently the Chancellor of the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. In terms of our operations, our principles, we're very concerned that this should be an active organization. So we have members who are spread across the continent, about 100 at the moment, and they all have to demonstrate that they really believe in cooperatives, because every year they have to pay a membership fee. As you can imagine, sometimes it is not so easy to extract, but we manage. But more importantly, perhaps, is that all the members of the leadership of Cooperation Africa agree that they will do that work on a voluntary basis. So none of us is paid, and for the period of the 18 months and up to now, from 2020, the work of this organization has been done mostly until last year, only by the members of the Executive Council, who did it on a voluntary basis. In the last year, we've managed to employ 2 people, which is very helpful. Another thing is that although we are not a cooperative, Cooperation Africa is not a cooperative, we consider ourselves what we would call a cooperative development agency or organization. We have decided that it was very important that we should affiliate to the International Cooperative Movement. And so we're an associate member of the International Cooperative Alliance. This is the body of all cooperatives in the world. We were able to secure some initial funding from Open Society. This is not a secret, the Open Society Foundation. And of course, they are not based in Africa, they are based outside Africa. But our intention, long-term intention, I guess, is that we should seek and receive a significant amount of funding on the one hand from African sources, and even longer term on the result of our own operations. We hope that in due course we can persuade African philanthropists to support what it is that we are doing. One of the main reasons is that the development model that most African countries have is based on the private sector. You keep hearing this, that the government, for some people who are extreme, they say the government has no role. Everything should, more or less everything should be done by the private sector. We're not saying that, but what we are saying is that the private sector needs a slightly broader definition. Cooperatives are not the state. If they're not the state, it means they're the private sector. So we need to have a broader definition of private sector. We need to include what we call not private enterprise, but collective enterprise. What cooperatives do is that they engage in collective enterprise, but they make their decisions democratically, and it also means that they have social objectives in addition to purely economic objectives. As I said, the work of Cooperation Africa is organized around 3 pillars. Research and advocacy is the focus for today. And what you will hear about falls underneath that. And therefore, I will not say much more about that because you're going to get a full briefing on that today. On the knowledge sharing, I will briefly say that we do 3 things, or we do 2 things, and we're opening a third, which really will be the foundation. The 2 things we do, we produce a news bulletin every month about cooperatives of the continent. And the other thing we do is that every month we do a webinar which allows cooperatives from across the continent to share their views and experiences, their challenges and their successes. But the main thing that we are trying to build, we're about to build, we're about to build, we've issued tender notices and we've received tenders, is that we want to build what we're calling a digital decentralized knowledge exchange system. What does it mean? It means that we're going to allow cooperatives to learn from one another, to do so online. Okay? And this is something, when it's built, it'll be for the whole continent, because it can be managed by us, or it can be managed by any other institution that we allow. So basically, for example, cooperatives will fill up a questionnaire. People with information will fill up a questionnaire. They will indicate whether they want something or they have something to give. And we have software that will match the 2 up, and we can put them together. So we'll build a system that people can learn collectively. We think that's very important. In that regard, or just linked to that, at the end of this year, we're organizing a conference called Building Strong African Cooperatives, Promoting an Enabling Environment for Sustainable Growth and Prosperity. That will be happening in November, and we're happy to say that we're going to do this in partnership with a number of major institutions and organizations. One, that the International Cooperative Alliance Africa office has agreed to partner with us to do this conference. Also, the only university on the continent that focuses exclusively on cooperatives, which is based in Kenya, called the Cooperative University of Kenya, have also agreed to partner with us to organize this conference. And there's another organization like ourselves, a continental cooperative development agency called AfriCoop, that is also going to partner with us. So there'll be 4 of us organizing this conference in November later this year. On the issue of cooperative financing, I just want to say a few words because we think that is really, really crucial. As I said, we started this project with the idea of setting up a bank, very grandiose. We were corrected and decided instead to set up what we call a credit line, i.e. we find a financial institution and we lend them the money so that they can lend on to cooperatives. So that is what we're going to do. And we conducted some research to find out who we should partner with. And the answer came back that the best person for us to partner with would be the Ghana Credit Union Association, COA. So we have been in discussions with them, and we have agreed that that's what will happen, that they will partner with us, we will partner with them. And we hope in the course of, towards the end of this month or beginning of July, to start some pilot projects where we are picking cooperatives of young people, men or women, to whom we are going to, through COA, lend money. So to either start or grow their cooperative. Okay? And that's, for us, is very, very important. It's that kind of cooperative. There are many kinds of cooperatives. That kind of cooperative is what we call a workers' cooperative. And basically, it's people who pool their resources to produce together. In Ghana, we can't boast of many worker cooperatives, but they exist in the rest of Africa. Just very briefly, they're very popular in Morocco, especially among women. Some of you may know of an oil called argan oil. It's either used for cooking or it's used as a cosmetic. It's produced by women cooperatives in Morocco. We found cooperatives in Kenya that do auto repair. A group of 10 engineers got together and decided to work together, and now they have an auto repair shop or organization that employs or has members, 20 members. They work as a cooperative. We found a very interesting cooperative in Tanzania where, as you will notice around Accra, say at Legon, for example, there's a taxi cooperative, yeah? Okay. But that one is slightly different from this. That one, each taxi has got its own owner and its own driver and so on and so forth. The cooperative in in Tanzania is slightly different. It works out of the international airport in Dar es Salaam. The cooperative owns the taxis. The drivers are paid a salary. But they also get a bonus at the end of the year based on how successful they have been. And the drivers collectively decide how that business is run. So it's a novel idea. But what it does and why we support it is that that kind of business, that kind of cooperative can help address the youth unemployment problem on our continent. And I think everybody knows that that is a major problem on our continent. So organizing people to create their own businesses, to produce that are viable, is for us a very important objective. So, we think that organizing cooperatives in Ghana will not be, especially worker cooperatives, will not be the simplest thing you decide to do. But since we are partnering with an organization that has a track record, that is the Credit Union Association of Ghana, and since we're piloting, we're doing a pilot to see what works, we think that if we go slowly enough, we will be able to persuade enough people at least to start. And if they're successful, we think that there's nothing like success as an example. And if others see that something is successful, that they will join into it. So, as I said, this overview is just for you to see where what we're going to discuss today fits in to what we do as an organization. And now I have great pleasure in handing over to Professor Akosua Darkwa, who is Professor of Sociology at the University of Ghana, and who is also a founding member of Cooperation Africa, and who will chair the session today. Please give her a very big welcome.
Thank you, Adute. Good morning, and thank you, each and every one of you, for taking time out of your schedule to join us for this launch. I'd like to remind us to turn our phones off, maybe not off, put it on silent or vibrate so that for the next 2 hours we can be sure there'll be no interference from conversation. So kindly do that for me. I'm going to introduce the co-patron of the Cooperation Africa to give us an address, and I'll start by telling you who he is. We probably do recognize him in the room already. It's Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers. Thank you. So I agreed with him that I will start his bio off by noting that he went to their school. The Achimotans will kill me, but he went to Infanspim School, And from there, he went on to do a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Ghana. He has both a master's degree and a Doctor of Philosophy degree from Cornell University, a Juris Doctorate degree from Case Western Reserve University School of Law, both based in the United States. And then he was admitted to the bar of the state of Ohio and the Republic of Ghana. He has had a long, illustrious career, which included working in the government of Ghana beginning in 1987. During that time, he served as Deputy Foreign Minister, Deputy Speaker, and Member of Parliament of Ghana. From the beginning of the outbreak of the Liberian Civil War, he was involved in ECOWAS mediation efforts till the Accra Comprehensive Peace Agreement of 2003 was signed. He was similarly involved in ECOWAS mediation efforts in several transitions from military to civilian rule in a number of West African countries. He joined ECOWAS in 2002, beginning as Executive Secretary from 2002 to 2005, and then President from 2006 to 2009. From 2010 to 2012, he was Secretary General of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of States. Between 2012 and 2014, he was the African Union United Nations Joint Special Representative for Darfur in Sudan and head of the African Union United Nations Hybrid Operation in Darfur. His last appointment, which ended in 2021, was as the head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel. He currently serves as chairman of the task force on the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, chairman of the advisory board on the Institute for Strategic Studies Africa, member of the board of governors of the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue in Geneva, member of the board of governors of the Swedish International Peace Research Institute in Stockholm, member of the advisory board of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center here in Accra, and a member of the West Africa Elders Forum in Abuja. As you can see, he is more than qualified for this job, and I invite him to the podium.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the kind introduction, warm words of introduction. And I noticed Thank you. Ambassador Amu Godfrey was on his way to Mfantsipim School when it was decided to establish Thank you very much. So let me start by welcoming you also. I join my good friend and brother, Adote Papo, to welcome you to this launch event, indeed the chair, and to say what a pleasure it is for me to be associated with Cooperative Africa. I was actually drafted into it by Adote, whom I've known for well over 50 years, past 50 years, and when he asked me to do something, or he asked me to jump, all I ask is, how high should I jump? I should also recognize Professor Abdul Ghaffar Abdullahi, who will be presenting his impressive report on the Ghana Country Cooperative as lead researcher. The significance of today is that we'll be informed about the methodology, the findings, and recommendations that this research team have put together. And it's my fervent wish that results of the work will help inform decisions that policymakers who regulate the cooperative sector take to make the environment for cooperatives more friendly, more enabling, more enduring. Cooperation Africa has undertaken several activities under its 3 program areas, which, as we have been reminded, are research and advocacy, knowledge sharing, and cooperative financing. The purpose of Cooperation Africa's work in research and advocacy is to investigate the factors affecting cooperatives in African countries. This is done so that the findings may be brought to the attention of policymakers and for them to take actions that make the environment for cooperatives more enabling. It will also allow best practices across the continent to be identified. The 4 areas of focus are the nature of cooperative footprint, the factors encouraging or discouraging cooperative membership, the nature of the political and legal environment for cooperatives, and the nature of the financial and technical support available to cooperatives. Under its knowledge sharing program, Cooperation Africa publishes a monthly news bulletin about cooperatives in Africa and holds monthly webinars where cooperatives in Africa are provided a platform to share their experiences, challenges, and successes. The focus has been on different types of cooperatives. Nevertheless, there has been special attention paid to what are termed worker cooperatives. These are cooperatives where people pool their labor and capital. They are in effect type of businesses where people employ themselves. The significance of this type of cooperative, especially in Africa, is that they can help to reduce the level of unemployment in general and youth unemployment in particular. In addition to the webinars, Cooperation Africa is about to start building a cooperative support network, which will in effect be a digital, decentralized knowledge exchange platform. Specifically commissioned software will be used to match the cooperatives in need with the resource persons who have indicated their willingness to share knowledge. The 2 parties do not need to be in the same village or town or country or even on the continent, since they can be brought together by utilizing digital technology. Such a system could help boost the incidence of knowledge sharing among cooperatives on the continent and greatly reduce the cost of organizing training workshops where people have to travel, and you know it's not that easy traveling on our continent, within our countries, or even across between countries. Indeed, it is a system that could be used to support individually owned businesses, especially startups. In its cooperative financing program, Cooperation Africa provides funds to cooperatives to help them form and develop their cooperatives. Ghana has relatively few worker cooperatives, yet has high levels of youth unemployment, like other countries on the continent. So, the focus of these loans will be on worker cooperatives. The purpose of these loans is to encourage young men and women, especially, to learn what it takes to engage successfully in collective enterprise. The Ghana Credit Union Association has been identified as a likely institution, and initial discussions have led to an agreement to collaborate. It is common to think that economies may have only two sectors, a state sector and a private sector. Usually in this scheme, there's no obvious place for cooperatives. Closer examination, however, suggests that cooperatives are part of the private sector. The difference between them and what we are used to considering as private sector is that they are collectives, and they make decisions according to one person, one vote, while the traditional or investor-owned private sector relies on individual enterprise and makes its decisions based on one share, one vote. The decision-making of cooperatives based on a combination of economic and social objectives. The decision-making of cooperatives is based on a combination of economic and social objectives, while the decision-maker or making process of investor-owned firms is usually based on only economic objectives, or what is commonly known as the bottom line. The benefits that cooperatives can bring to a developing economy are also many and varied. Simply put, they allow their members to do collectively what they would have found either difficult or near impossible to do alone. This applies to securing inputs for farming or selling the output from the individual farms collectively. In the first instance, they can benefit from bulk buying, and in the latter, they benefit from bulk selling by coming together in marketing cooperatives. In each case, their members get a better deal. This is also true, for example, when the members save together in credit unions. They can build up significant reserves so they can borrow as and when they need to. In Ghana, the estimated 490 credit unions in 2023 had just under 1 million members with combined savings of $374 million. Altogether, Africa in the same year had just under 26,000 credit unions, a total membership of 41 million people, and combined savings of just under $10.5 billion. This is lending power that, when utilized mainly for investment, could make significant contributions to the growth potential of individual countries and indeed the continent as a whole. Another advantage that individuals in a cooperative benefit from is the daily practice of democracy, workplace democracy. By the nature of their decision-making, which requires one person, one vote, irrespective of shareholding, they are persuading or being persuaded, agreeing or disagreeing, winning or losing votes as they work together side by side each day. Additionally, By providing self-employment and making the things for local consumption, they tend to develop competitive advantages over foreign companies in certain sectors, thereby strengthening local culture. And by reducing imports and perhaps increasing manufactured exports, help to shore up the balance of payments and the exchange rate. By engaging in collective entrepreneurship, they make technological advances and improve labor productivity. Finally, they produce a society that is less unequal, a concern we have these days, and is likely to exhibit greater levels of social cohesiveness as a result. As I end, I want to mention an initiative about the cooperative landscape in Africa. Last year, the Pan-African Parliament, an organ of the African Union, adopted a model law for cooperatives in Africa. That law was approved by the meeting of African heads of state in their last summit in February this year. It sets out to provide a common framework for regulating cooperatives on the continent and to bring that process more in line with the procedures that are in operation in other parts of the world. In other words, to provide best practice for African cooperatives. The United Nations General Assembly declared this year International Year of Cooperatives. It would therefore be fitting if this year African governments take steps to domesticate the AU Model Cooperative Law, which was adopted by the heads of state in the February summit, that is February this year. Such action would lay the foundations of a vibrant and dynamic cooperative sector that could make significant and major contributions to the development of our economies and societies, the creation of jobs for our young people, which is urgently needed and required, and also assist with the functioning, the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Cooperatives definitely can contribute to the attainment of the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, which are pathways to shared prosperity for all, leaving no one behind. And this will be a sure way to silencing the guns in Africa. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to hear about the reports which are to be launched shortly. If you look in the program that you have, it says the study was undertaken between April 2024 and April 2025. But work for that began before that point. It included members of the executive committee and the academic advisory panel, which include Professor Olufemi Salian-Decker in London, Professor Wycliffe Oboka in Kenya, Professor Mamadou Goita in Mali, and Professor Vishwa Sadgar in South Africa, contributing to determining what exactly will the report consist of. So they had to determine there would be 4 different reports, one on the cooperative footprint in Ghana, one looking at the inhibiting and enabling factors affecting cooperative membership, a third looking at the political and legal environment for cooperatives in Ghana, and then a fourth that will look at the technical and financial support available to cooperatives in Ghana. So those were the 4 themes that were discussed and agreed upon. At that point, the research design for this had to be thought through. For that, we had the help of Professor Georgie Chikata, who's based at the School of Oriental and African Studies, helping us to think through how exactly should this work, what process should it take. I helped with coordinating between Cooperation Africa and who are researchers in the country that I think can help with doing this. So between Georgie and myself, we came up with the 4 people who did the work for us. They are Prince Asafueje, used to work at the Trades Union Congress. He's no longer there and he's currently out of the country, so not present in the room. Then we had Dr. Usu Buampong, who works out of the University of Cape Coast and traveled all the way to join us here. Thank you for that. And then Clara Kasati. Clara is here in the back. She's also here from the University of Ghana. And then we also have Professor Vera Fiado in the front, also from the University of Ghana Business School, who is here. So the 4 of them put together the reports. When they were done with drafts, it was read by as many of the executive team members as possible and read by each of the academic advisory panel members. Then we had a hybrid session to discuss the findings and how they could be improved. They went back and revised the documents. Then at that point, Professor Abdullahi, also based at the University of Ghana Business School, did a summary of the findings from the 4 different reports. So what we have here today is a summary based off of the excellent work done by the 4 colleagues I've already introduced. And we will have Professor Abdul Ghafaru Abdullahi give us a summary of those 4 reports next. Professor Abdullahi, how do I introduce you? I've done. Okay.
Thanks so much, Prof, and thanks everyone. So I'm sure by now you know very well that I am essentially a messenger to convey the findings of a series of studies that had been conducted by a team of experts. We are lucky to have 3 of them in this room who have just been introduced to us. So Prof. Dakwa introduced Dr. Usbompong as a lecturer from the University of Cape Coast. In the program, I saw that he was University of Ghana. And then he cautioned that if his vice chancellor sees that, they may think he's doing galamsey with the University of Ghana without the knowledge of the university. So let's take notice of that. So these are the team of researchers. Can you please show the slides? Okay, so this the team of researchers who conducted the research work that Prof. Akusodako has already just informed us about. And what I'm going to do essentially is to give you just a gist of the content of the work and then encourage you to read the details. I'm asked to speak for up to about 20 minutes, and you're talking of 4 different studies, research papers, plus a synthesis of it. So I'm just doing some basic picking and choosing of a couple of key highlights within the reports, and then encourage everyone to take a look at the individual reports to get a much better sense of what the content of the work actually is. So by way of outline, I would just give you a sense of the objectives and aims that the study set out to achieve, the methodologies that were adopted in conducting the study, some key findings, some key highlights, some of the policy recommendations that are outlined in the reports, and by way of conclusion, some few reflections. I mean, in terms of, for example, some of the challenges that the team encountered and what I personally feel or think of the nature of the current environment in terms of the kind of prospects that we have for promoting cooperatives in our country. So we've already, heard and already know a lot about the importance of cooperatives, which both in the Ghanaian context and the wider African context have a very long a history. I mean, in the case of Ghana, dating back even to pre-colonial times, and formal cooperatives were introduced in this country as far back as 1910. I mean, quite a long time ago. So we have a very long history of engaging with cooperatives or cooperative activities in our context. As of 2022, data from official government sources suggested that Ghana had over 25,000 registered cooperatives with a cumulative membership exceeding 2.1 million and a total capital base of around 570 million Ghana cedis. But I'm sure all of us in this room are very much aware that the cooperatives landscape in Ghana faces a wide range of challenges, institutional, legal, financial, and so on and so forth. So what this study did was to sort of provide a comprehensive, some kind of analytically grounded assessment of the state of Ghana's cooperatives. And as Prof. Dakwa has mentioned, there are 5 different reports, 5 different studies that actually make up this report. One of them focuses on the framework, the legal institutional framework. One of the studies conducted by Prince that we are told is currently out of the country is about public attitudes and public awareness and attitudes towards cooperatives in the Ghanaian context. Then there is a separate study looking at the financial and technical support systems for cooperatives, and a study by Dr. Osuboampong examining the factors that shape cooperative membership. Why do people agree to be part of cooperatives? And the 5th one is a synthesized, summarized report that brings all of these together in a much more succinct manner. So the overall aim of the studies leading to today's event was to provide a comprehensive assessment of the state of cooperatives in Ghana and offer policy-relevant recommendations for enhancing their effectiveness and sustainability in the context of Ghana. Specifically, we had 4 objectives. Trying to address the various thematic areas that the studies were to focus on. One was to examine the legal institutional frameworks governing cooperatives in Ghana and then evaluate their alignment with international cooperative principles. The second was to assess the level of, the awareness level and attitude towards cooperatives. Third was to identify key enablers and inhibitors that influence cooperative membership decisions, including the various economic, social, and policy-related factors that inform people's decision to be part or not of cooperatives in Ghana. So the synthesis report itself sort of brings all of these together, and presenting each study as a separate chapter on its own, but preceded with a chapter just sort of highlighting the introduction, some form of literature review in terms of the relationship between cooperatives and development. And a final chapter in that report sort of summarizes or concludes the study and highlights a series of policy recommendations. What methodologies did we adopt in doing this work? The methods varied, across the different studies, but put together, we essentially conducted or adopted a multi-method design approach that combined qualitative and quantitative research methods. It involves, for example, a survey of some 2,784 respondents across the different parts of Ghana, covering the northern, southern, and middle belts of the country. We conducted in-depth key informant interviews with a series of cooperative leaders and officials within government or state institutions, and conducted focus group discussions with cooperative members across the country, and just to ensure that we became as inclusive as possible in terms of who participated in the FGDs. These were conducted in different languages depending on which part of the country were working. So some of the FGDs were conducted in English, some in Ga, some in Chi, some in Ewe, some in Dagbani. So just to make sure that language did not become a barrier in terms of people's ability to participate in these meetings. We also adopted a kind of a case study approach, and this is specifically in relation to the study that Dr. Usu Bompong actually conducted, by trying to identify cooperatives that had been widely identified to have been successful, because we thought it was important to learn some lessons from these organizations that have been able to maintain and expand their membership over time. So we purposefully selected some cooperatives and studied them in more detail, just to understand what is it that they are doing differently that explains their relative success within that field. And of course, we also utilized secondary literature, did a review of various legal and policy documents as part of the study. Still on the issue of methodology, maybe we are getting too academic, but we thought it's important to tell people how we arrived at this report. We adopted different sampling techniques, just to make sure that the study's findings were as representative as possible. So we utilized random sampling to select survey participants from the cooperative membership list, and this is in relation to the survey that we conducted, but then employed stratified sampling to ensure representation across gender, across geographical regions. As I said, we purposefully targeted to make sure that we covered cooperatives within the southern, middle, and northern zones of the country, but also we deliberately set out to make sure that we reach out to different cooperative types, so that our findings will not necessarily be focused on only specific type or sectors of the wider cooperative landscape. But we adopted purposive sampling in terms of the selection of the leaders, the policymakers, and the case studies that we actually adopted to or selected as basis of the study. So let me just give you some very broad-brushed highlights of what is contained in some of the chapters or some of the studies that our various team of experts conducted. Starting with the legal and the institutional framework, the report highlights the fact that even though we do indeed have a legal framework in place anchored around NLCD 252 of 1968, this law tends to be highly archaic, is not aligned with international cooperative principles, and is inadequate for regulating a modern, diversified cooperative economy. Under this particular law, for example, 10 people could easily come together to form what they would call a cooperative. And this has actually been a source of concern, or has undermined that landscape in some respects. For example, we find that this law has essentially encouraged the formation of very fragmented cooperatives that struggle to actually achieve economies of scale. And this is what one of the respondents in the course of our fieldwork, the focus group discussions, made a point that, in quote, if you have 10 people forming a cooperative, chances are that it is likely to fail, because how much resources can 10 people really pool together? And again, this legal framework or the limitations associated with the legal framework has encouraged what the report referred to as small mushroom and political cooperatives. I mean, you have situations where people, especially in the cocoa sector, that dominant elites, local elites, or more influential people would easily come together to hardly put together a small group of people with the sole objective of actually benefiting from the distribution of inputs to farmers by various governments. Some of these inputs actually in some cases end up being sold back to the very farmers who were supposed to receive them for free in the first place. And we think this is an issue that can be addressed with a more up-to-date legal framework. The framework also grants too much discretionary powers to cooperative boards in managing assets of these entities, and this has in some instances actually led to some forms of financial mismanagement, because there are no enough restrictions in terms of what board members of cooperatives could do or are not actually capable of doing. The institutional framework is also characterized by a series of challenges. In particular, the key institutions or bodies responsible for the regulation and the provision of support for cooperatives in this country tend to suffer from chronic underfunding, which also means that they are not actually able to perform or undertake their oversight responsibilities enough. Just to give you an example from some of the reports that we read produced by the Finance Ministry, in 2022, the government of Ghana allocated some 9.6 million Ghana cedis to the Department of Cooperatives. But just about 4% of this amount of money was actually meant for the procurement of goods and services. The rest had to go into salaries. So out of 9.6 million cedis, only 388,000 Ghana cedis was meant to do the real work, and so on and so forth. So what it means essentially is that these budgetary allocations simply went into paying salaries, but as to what is needed to facilitate the effectiveness of these institutions in conducting audits, in conducting their oversight responsibilities, and so on and so forth. And so this chronic underfunding is actually a major challenge that tends to undermine this sector. And insufficient financial resources literally means that field monitoring activities can at best be very, very limited. And again, this is supported by data from official government sources, which suggests, for example, that only 48% of cooperatives in Ghana in 2022 were actually inspected by the Department of Cooperatives. And the department was actually also able to conduct audits of newly established cooperatives for only just about 13% of them. And you would understand, because the resources for undertaking these responsibilities in a much more detailed, diligent manner are just simply not available. In terms of the awareness and attitude towards cooperatives, the studies report also made very, very important, very interesting findings that I'm sure each and everyone in here would be very curious in reading, in learning about them. But we find in general that public awareness of cooperatives actually varies substantially by region, they vary substantially by age, they vary substantially on the basis of socioeconomic background, even the sector you work, either in the public or private sector. And overall, our findings showed that older people of around 60 years and above, older, especially in rural residents, exhibited higher awareness and more favorable attitudes or views towards cooperatives than the younger generations. I mean, in general, the youth and urban residents more broadly exhibited very lower level of awareness and lukewarm attitudes towards cooperatives. And so we saw very clear evidence of some generational and socioeconomic gaps in engagement as far as both the knowledge and people's attitude towards cooperatives in Ghana are concerned. The study on awareness and attitude also actually, employs some quantitative methodologies to estimate, to give us a sense of how different demographic characteristics actually relate to or influence how much people know about these institutions and what the nature of their attitudes towards them is. And overall, the findings showed that employment status, levels of education, where you are located, either in the middle, southern or northern zone, but also sectoral affiliations significantly influence cooperative knowledge and attitudes. In general, cooperatives within the financial sector, especially credit unions, actually tend to command greater trust and membership, partly because of their perceived economic benefits, whereas those within the services sector tend to lag behind in terms of their visibility and performance. I know very well that Dr. Bampong sitting here would say I am doing injustice to his study because, as I said, these are very detailed reports, but we're just trying to give you some appetizers so that you will read the detailed reports and get, so Dr. Bampong and colleague researchers don't feel shortchanged if you think I haven't said enough about the findings of your work. They will get the details when they read the actual reports. In terms of enablers and barriers, so we set out to find out what are the key factors that motivate people to become members of cooperatives, or what are some of the factors that make people feel that, well, I just don't want to be associated with these institutions. And in terms of the enablers, the study highlighted a couple of factors that encourage people to want to be part of the cooperative sort of like sector. So community embeddedness, to what extent these entities are seen to be embedded within wider communities and solving or addressing day-to-day problems within their communities. The kind of social networks that these cooperatives have been able to cultivate, the credibility of the leadership of these entities, and the kind of benefit, the tangible economic benefits people feel they are actually able to drive from some of these institutions. Barriers included historical experiences of financial mismanagement. People just feel that, well, there have been histories when these entities have actually siphoned off people's money and so on. The weak leadership capacity among a lot of the cooperatives that we have. There are some barriers related to gendered norms that also tend to limit women's participation. There are age-related exclusions, and in particular the youth sometimes just don't feel that they belong to these entities because there are also some age-related kinds of barriers, especially when you're talking of leadership positions within these cooperatives, but also poor internal governance structured, and some growing worries, or if you like, disillusionment with the politicized mushroom cooperatives that we highlighted earlier. The financing landscape also, report or study also made several very interesting findings. We found, for example, that even though agricultural cooperatives are much more numerically dominant, they also actually tend to be the most undercapitalized. And capital mobilization within this landscape tends to be dominated by those operating within the financial sector, financial cooperatives as we refer to them, that actually account for over 96% of cooperative capital. So you see that on the one hand, in terms of numerical dominance, in terms of numbers, you will find a lot more of cooperatives operating within the agriculture sector. But capital mobilization tends to be very limited among these cooperatives and tend to be largely concentrated among those that operate within the financial sector. Government funding for cooperatives, I'm sure we all would agree, tends to be very, very minimal. It's actually also inconsistent, and is not actually, in many cases, well targeted. More established ones tend to get more support than relatively newer sort of like cooperatives. And the landscape is, the funding landscape in general actually is not sufficiently supportive in terms of facilitating the operations of these entities. There are some forms of technical support for cooperatives, but this also tends to be very, very limited, and again tend to benefit those with higher levels of visibility. There are some forms of support from foreign entities, foreign donors and NGOs and so on. All of these are there, but again, just like in the case of government support, these tend to be very, ad hoc and uneven, and sustainability of cooperative financing actually remains a major challenge. What are some of the recommendations that these studies have made? Number one, and again, this is a summary. This is not a complete list of the recommendations that you would find in the various or individual reports. As you would expect, one of the key recommendations is the urgent need for legal and institutional reforms, because, as I mentioned, the current legislation really needs to be replaced with a new cooperative act that better reflects international standards, whilst of course remaining responsive to the socio-economic context of Ghana. And any such new legislation also need to take into account or safeguard issues of local democracy, provide better protection of cooperatives' assets, and mechanisms for equitable member participation in the governance and financial decision-making processes of cooperatives. The report emphasized the need for better institutional support for the sector. The Department of Cooperatives, the Ghana Cooperative Council, and various related agencies, as we point out, need significant budgetary and technical support to be able to fulfill their mandates in a much better way. We highlighted the need for improvements in institutional coordination, and the report suggested the need for a national cooperative development agency that could essentially serve as a central platform for coordination, knowledge sharing, and intercooperative collaboration, all of which we expect to help sort of strengthen solidarity across the sector. Targeted financing is extremely important and is required to promote equity and participation within the sector. And we think sustained civic education and engagement would also be very, very critical, especially in revitalizing the cooperative sector. A kind of civic education that would especially target, awareness level in terms of the values, the potential contribution of cooperatives, but targeting particularly the youth through the use of digital platforms, and integrating cooperative education into vocational and entrepreneurship curricula could, in the long run, help nurture a new generation of cooperative leaders, especially in emerging sectors such as digital services, green energy, and the cooperative economy. Finally, we think policies really need to actively support inclusive, socially responsible cooperative models. And one of the key points that the report made in this regard is to encourage the formation of multi-stakeholder and social cooperatives in sectors in various sectors and facilitating alliances and federations among smaller cooperatives, which we hope would actually help generate better economies of scale, improve market access to these entities, and enhance collective bargaining. And the cause of this, advance the principle of cooperation among cooperatives. Let me just highlight some few kind of reflections, and some of these actually included some challenges that we encountered in the course of doing this work. So in the course of actually analyzing the legal, institutional, political environment and so on, one of the key documents that we thought was very, very necessary for us to review is the draft cooperative bill. We do understand that a draft bill has been in place, but the research team actually struggled to lay hands on it. Even some members of parliament that the team contacted didn't seem to sort of like have access, and this kind of challenge just highlights, I don't know why a draft bill of this nature would be treated as a confidential document. Maybe some of you in this room has it, and if you don't mind sharing that, we can still actually do some work around it, because we thought one of the key things that we needed to do was to highlight the extent to which this bill is in alignment with some of the global trends that that are sort of like going on, but we just couldn't find it, and we thought that was a limitation in terms of what we really wanted to do in these reports. The other key reflecting point that I'd like to make is, if you look at the manifesto of the current government, you would conclude that there is a certain policy momentum for cooperatives at the moment. Whether and to what extent we take advantage of that is another question. When you take the 2024 manifesto of the ruling NDC, I got tired in counting the word cooperatives, right? And there are so many areas where cooperatives are actually presented as the center of this government's agriculture and women's economic empowerment agenda. It talks of implementing a broiler production cooperative, promoting the establishment of farmers cooperatives in every district, refocus the Exim Bank to invest in concessional support annually through cooperatives and community banks, support cooperative credit union activities, provide financial and technical support for enterprise development through cooperatives, and so on and so forth. So it's like cooperatives have been put at the very, very center of the government's economic empowerment, women's empowerment, agricultural development kind of agenda. And this actually provides gives us some prospects. What we probably also need to push for, which I didn't see in the manifesto, is the issue of the legal framework. I mean, the draft bill. How soon would the draft bill be passed? And I think those of us in here who are into advocacy can take these issues up, because we certainly do have a more conducive environment for promoting cooperative activity. So I think I would leave it there, and if you have questions or comments, the experts are sitting there, I can see them. We can have some conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, so on that note, we'll engage in a little protocol here, Prof, and declare the report duly launched. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we've heard about the reports, it has been duly launched. The work of Cooperative Africa has been shared with you. I'd like to invite members of the audience who have goodwill messages for Cooperation Africa to come up. I know the first is Dr. Kwabena Nyakutu from the Trade Union Congress.
Thank you, Prof. How did you know that I was the first? Okay, so good morning, or is it good afternoon? And I want to regard of you as comrades. Chairman, we are happy to be part of this engagement. Also because I just checked the TUC constitution, and somewhere in the one of our priorities, in fact our pledge, is to promote cooperatives. And I must also admit that we haven't done much in that area. But listening to the report and all the messages, I think it's a missing link in our work. And from here, we will take it up seriously to also cooperate. And the message is clear when everybody says that worker cooperatives in Ghana are very limited compared to other African countries. Yet, we have so much unemployment. And from the policy unit of the TUC, I have written a lot about how you solve the unemployment problem. But we haven't availed our minds to how cooperatives can be used to solve the unemployment problem. And I think this is the moment when we move away from calling on government all the time to solve the unemployment problem, but also use our own resources, the convening power of the TUC, for example, to try to do something about cooperatives in Ghana. Now, listening to the professor, he's right, or the report is apt when it says that older people in Ghana know more about cooperatives than younger people. And they also tend to have more positive views. And I was just telling the former Secretary General of TUC, Comrade Edward Mankwa, that I heard more about cooperatives from my father than from any other educational institution in this country. He was very passionate about the cooperative movement. And he told me, and I don't know, maybe I need to verify, that if you take the company called PBC, the Produce Buying Company, all the assets, or nearly, were cooperative assets that were taken over by government in the 1960s. So there's a lot more to be done to get young people come to appreciate cooperatives. But also to do that means that we need to not just propound theories and argument. We need to make cooperatives a little bit more rare to young people. And I want to start, if the chairman will permit. So we hear cooperatives all the time, and the chairman is right when he says that in the world today we have the state sector and the private sector, and cooperatives appear missing. Now, if you take this worldview and arrangement, state and the private, the center of it would be, say, United States, where a very limited government, but heavily private sector, profit motivated. But the United States is also a country where cooperatives are very, very, very dominant. And people see it in their everyday practical life. And in fact, when you pay due attention to the United States, even in Ghana, you see what they use their cooperatives to do. So there's this drink called cranberry juice. I don't know. Many people here have consumed it. Do you know it's produced by farmer cooperatives in the United States? Do you know that? Nobody knows. So this is the practical demonstration we need to let people know what cooperatives can do. So they have a farmer cooperative in Massachusetts. It's headquartered in Massachusetts, but it has membership from Canada and Chile. That produces the fruits, and then they turn it into the cranberry juice. And we have it all across our shops in Ghana. True or false? Okay, so this is a practical demonstration of what cooperatives can do. Somewhere in New York, they have this cities, or they call it co-op city. I don't know if you have heard, with tall, high-rise buildings. This is also another cooperative movement that provides low-cost housing for people in New York. I think it's also in other states. Okay. So the few comrades in the room, this is what cooperatives, worker cooperatives can do. What we have done in Ghana, the workers are very dominant in the credit unions. Because, and it's also popular. That's why it's also very popular. But how do we move away from this contribution credit unions to using our skills to come together to provide a service and govern that service in a manner that provides benefit to us, but also benefit to the community in which we live? This is the task, and I'm sure I speak for the comrades in the room when I say that the TUC will take it up and make sure that we collaborate with Cooperative Africa going forward to build a stronger cooperative movement. I thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much for your strong show of support for Cooperation Africa. Is there anyone from the Ministry of Employment here who would like to join in the goodwill messages? Okay, if not, then my job is to summarize what has happened over the last 2 hours. But given the comprehensive nature of the report, I don't want to disgrace myself. So I won't summarize. I think we learned some very good, important lessons that we can take forward. Some of the statistics was quite shocking, but I guess that's what these things are supposed to do. The report is available on the website cooperationafrica.org. The synthesis report is there, as well as the 4 individual reports. Okay. So do you want to come up?
All right, I have a mic here.
At the end. Right.
Thank you, Prof. I'm William Daly, and I work with the Department of Cooperatives. Okay. It's under the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations. Now, Labor, Jobs, and Employment. Employment, yes. Labor, Jobs, and Employment. That is it. And
should come up then.
Okay.
And then GBC TV will cover you nicely.
Thank you. So, I want first of all to thank the Cooperation Africa. I have never heard about this organization until I had an invitation. Apparently, they've done a lot of work that we should be a major stakeholder in. Unfortunately, I only heard from my colleague that this is not to more or less downgrade what the marvelous work they've done. But my colleague just told me in the course of the work, one of the researchers spoke for some data. Indeed, most of the things talked about here are something that is a bane to us. It's of concern to us, some of us currently managing the department. I have been with the department, myself and the other colleague, for over 25 years. And it is not that we are happy with the way things are going, because when we talk of cooperatives with 10-member cooperatives and all that, especially in the agriculture cooperatives. And also we have other challenges which I don't want to bore you with now. I only want to appeal that even capacity of staff to be able to deliver services to the cooperatives, because we do not have a training institution around that deals specifically with cooperatives for our staff in order to better or upgrade skills in order to give a better service delivery. We also have that challenge. Fortunately or unfortunately, some institutions in Malaysia have been helping a few of us through some virtual trainings in the past. In fact, last year was the last. This 2024, I think we had one. We are thinking maybe the universities in Ghana or maybe the colleges could have some faculties or something dedicated to something in the cooperative sphere. And having a lot of the academy here, I want to put that as a plea. And also to ask that let's cooperate more, the stakeholders, let's cooperate more. And just before I sit, I want to say that the draft bill, I think I can provide it. Maybe I wasn't spoken to before. It isn't a promise, but I think I can get it for you. And on that note, I say thank you. Please, let's cooperate.
Thank you very much, Department of Cooperatives. We've got research assistants already, and I'm sure Cooperation Africa will be liaising with you more going forward. So I'm going to go back. I'm not going to summarize. I said that already. I think that, in fact, the Department of Cooperatives rep has done a good summary of the situation for us. So no need to go over that. I'll remind you to go to the cooperationafrica.org website. You will find the 5 reports, the synthesis, as well as the 4 individual reports. There's also a link to a membership form on there, so that if you want to join the course, you can sign up and join us to improve cooperatives in the country. And to close, I'd like to do a list of thank yous. First, to the researchers, without whom there would have been no report to launch. To Professor Georgie Chikata at SOAS, who donated time to think about the research design. To the CA family, so the executives, the advisory panel, the staff, the volunteers, thank you for the many hours of meetings, donating your time and your skills in different ways to make today possible. I'd like to thank Akunu Dake, way in the back, for helping with organizing this event. Just so you know, if you want to ensure that you have an event that's well done, Akunu Dake is the go-to person for that. So thank you for that. Thank you to the IT team. Lots of sophisticated things going on over here, way above my head. Thank you for making it possible. It's allowed for a hybrid session, so we have participants online as well. So we thank you for that. And then thank you to the audience, both those of you present with us here and those online, because without you, we couldn't have done a good launch. So thank you very much.